Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Big Benjamin's Fight for Freedom. And in the last show I discussed that I was going to have a co-host, and here he is. So welcome J.S. Cooper to the show.
Hi, thanks Big Benjamin.
I'm going to say we've known each other a long time before we even started filming, so this
is true.
This should be fun. He's got to put up all my silly behaviours, and he knows everything like that. So today
a little too well.
Yeah, he does. Well, I do Big Benjamin's show just really to bring an injection of common sense to the world, because it's a crazy world we live in, and I think you're the one that's nearest to me in sort of that frame of mind, really, knowing that...
Please, you flatter me.
You know that the world's gone mad. You know that the mainstream media basically is on some other planet at the minute. They are feeding sort of like...
completely, yes.
Mad agenda. And the alternative media also has its own... Well, like I said in the first show, all media has its own agenda. But even the alternative media has its crazy agenda as well. I mean, it's...
Well, try to find me a person in this world who isn't at least a little bit biased. However, I would say that the agenda of people in alternative media, independent YouTubers and stuff like that, it's a lot more pure than corporate media.
Yeah, you could say that they're doing it, I suppose if they're doing it if they're on free will and they're not, I suppose even though they have a direction they want to take it.
It's wonderful.
It's a more honest direction.
No, it's a wonderful sort of revolution in terms of media, because it's for the first time you're getting pure, honest opinion, it's unfiltered. Well, despite YouTube and other platforms trying to silence them by demonetizing people and content creators just not being able to fund themselves anymore. But unfortunately, we have plenty of outlets.
Bringing you to that point, though, do you think that the mainstream censors too much of that? You're saying YouTube is an organisation that is now starting to censor certain opinions. Would you say that the mainstream media, for example, in this country, the BBC and ITV, are doing that too heavily now?
For a while.
You think that
for a long time, but they've always had a sort of direct narrative that they've always taken. Their editors have always told their anchors what to say and to fit in with their narrative.
I mean, I've always been particularly the BBC. I've always been one of the mind that it's for a certain type of people. I mean, you look at the type of programming. I think it's aimed mostly at middle class people, really. I think it's...
Yeah, certainly a lot of... I mean, have you ever watched BBC Three? Some of the junk that they put out on that, yes, definitely.
And going back to the YouTube thing as well, obviously we hope to eventually put this on YouTube. Anything to say about these sort of things that are censoring? Do you think that...
Well, you see, this is why we've got a wonderful new platform called Minds, and what I would recommend is, to anybody looking for a decent free speech avenue, if you really want to go out there and really let loose all of your thoughts, without the fear of any sort of censorship, go to minds.com instead of YouTube. Obviously, YouTube is a much bigger platform at the moment, and so that will always have its place. But I'd say, at least as a backup, always have a Minds account. That's going to be a big thing in a few years, I've no doubt.
See, that's very interesting as well. I mean, I think with YouTube though, they have maybe one thing that the Minds doesn't, which is the number of people that are on there.
Well, yeah, of
people
course.
That go on there. I suppose the internet traffic, as you'd say, and the worry is that if you censor people, even if they're not saying something that's overly controversial, that I suppose it could create a backlash, and I suppose to a degree it could help Minds, but also it's brainwashing another set of people that don't do homework, people that don't really, they'll go on YouTube, they'll not really notice that certain things have gone.
Well, most channels on, they have their start on YouTube and then they go to other platforms, alternative platforms, which by the way have only sprung up as a direct result of censorship on the existing platforms. And the more and more that they push that on the existing platforms, the more and more people will leave to go to elsewhere, because YouTube don't own the monopoly on, digital content, on digital discussion or anything like that. Facebook, they're just the third or fourth big social networks. They had MySpace first, didn't they? I mean, definitely in the UK we used Bebo for a little while.
Oh yes.
Yeah, we can't. That's a bit of a ghost now, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's died off of the.
Does that even exist anymore? I don't even know if Bebo exists.
I'm going to say I'm not being honest, so I wouldn't even tell you. I think with this other thing though, if it's driving people away and they're creating their own things, do those sites just end up preaching to the masses though? Like people that just are all of a similar mind anyway?
It is mass media, but of course you get, as with anything, you get clicks, don't you? Like you'll have the social justice warrior community, you've got the skeptic community, there's, they're loved to be called. You will get people of similar opinions convalescing together. It doesn't matter where you go or what platform you're on, you will always get people who want to listen to people who are of a similar mindset. The great thing about unbridled free speech is the fact that you can often find something that challenges what you've already perceived as to be true, and take on perhaps a new opinion. You can find out something new that you never even thought of before. I know that this is the case for me when a lot of skeptical YouTubers I've liked to watch, I've found something quite enlightening. It's helped me notice things on a much sort of deeper scale as well. Things have rather than just seeing things on the surface as you see like in the media, that how they present it to you, stuff like race and class and all that stuff. They're trying to tell you one thing, but your eyes don't lie. You see things and you hear things every day. I think that content creators on stuff like YouTube and Minds and stuff like that, that's a lot more real. It feels a lot more, it's a real thing. I mean,
what I would say with those people is
it's still a third-hand experience.
They're clearly doing it with good intentions. I think nobody really doubts it. I think that that's why it's more honest.
Well, definitely some people are. I wouldn't say all of them. Definitely.
Well, I suppose not always the case, but some people use it merely for propaganda and
it's like I said,
to tell you blame.
Find me one person who's purely, not biased and
I mean, this is the one thing I said in the first show of this program, is that I do have a narrative. I don't deny it. I don't intend to, go over the top and brainwash people. But what I'm trying to say is that I have my own, like every other media, I have my own narrative. Now, my narrative is, I'd like to think, common sense. Let's talk about things, unbiasedly. So let's, for example, if we're going to talk about Trump, which we are today, let's review his policies properly, and let's see, and the decisions he's made, and let's do it, from the middle and say, well, okay, I can see why he's gone down this route. I don't agree with this thing. You know what I mean? Like,
I agree. No, you can't.
Because the way I feel the media is with Trump,
yes,
is he's the comic book villain, and they're not really doing their homework on him. He's sort of like, whatever he does, he's wrong. Even though
he's the new bogeyman. He's just the next Bush. He's the next Reagan. They always seem to pick out a new presidential bogeyman every decade. It's the new one that for this time, a few years. Obviously everything will be affected as what the course of the current president is doing. The new one afterwards. There's always going to be someone new, and they'll always pick out a new bogeyman for every generation. Trump just happens to be this current generation's bogeyman.
You see, I'm not trying to glorify him, but I just want to give him I just want to really give him sort of like the ground to be a president and like say, well, I don't like what he did here. You see, like, not everything Obama did was great, but some stuff was.
Gosh, no. Hell no.
But some stuff was. But I think that him and Trump have the same problem, that whenever they want to bring anything in, they've got a set of people, particularly in Congress, who can just stamp it down. And it may be stuff that's actually, what the United States needs, particularly.
If you look at it on a sort of structural level, it's definitely a problem, because the President of the United States is quite different to a lot of other heads of state in the fact that he's directly executive. So he drives policy, he drives, initiative in his country. And like here, for example, we've got a separate head of state from a head of government. Whereas in the US, that's the same thing. The head of government is the head of state. So the Queen never enacts policy in this country, for example, in the United Kingdom. It's all down to the Prime Minister. It's a purely legislative, executive body. Whereas the President, he's a bit of both. He's the sort of culmination of both. But that leads to him being a partisan quite often. In this instance, though, with Donald Trump, he's sort of like he's a Republican, on the face of it, on the name, But you got to remember that this man used to be a Democrat. He's switched parties whenever it seemed favourable to him.
His opponent did exactly the same thing in reverse as well.
Because Hillary Clinton started out as a Republican. A lot of people forget this fact, that she used to be not only a Republican, but when she was young, she was quite hardline.
Yeah.
Very hardline. Trump, quite conversely, he's just always been a man of business, so he's gone wherever his business interests suited him, really, I suppose. Whoever he could get as a potential ally. Which is why
I know it sounds like
he's gone independent sometimes when he couldn't get any support, and he's only gone on the Republican ticket because they let him. It's obvious that he's not in big leagues with the grand old party as it is now. He's just purely used them as a platform to get to the presidency, and now he's got his own agenda.
And we're going to talk about that after the break. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Big Benjamin's Fight for Freedom. And I'm here with J.S. Cooper, and we've been discussing a bit about the media, but now we're going to go on to Donald Trump. He's been president for a year now, so let's fire away some questions on that. So firstly, we have, with Donald Trump, the wall.
Yeah,
thoughts on the wall?
Yeah, where's that got to? Where's the wall?
So he's wanting to build it between Mexico and the United States.
On the border, yes.
On the border, that's as far as I got, and that it was something to do with keeping drugs out. Now I think there's a sense to that.
That's not a bad idea. But they don't always bring it in that way. That's the thing, they do bring it in by...
They could fly it in, I guess.
Fly it in. The thing is, you step up one wall, they'll always find an inventive way to bring it in. But it does keep at least... There is some sense behind it, though, because at least you've got the most physical, check on the border. Then people aren't just... There's parts of the US-Mexican border where you can just cross,
I have to say it's sort of a defence of heavy security on the US-Mexican border. Is that on one side you've got El Paso, which is one of the safest cities in America, and then on the other side you've got Juarez, Mexico, which is probably one of the most violent places on the planet. It's largely because Juarez is, I used to be pretty good at Spanish.
Juarez.
Used to, obviously it's used as a place to channel drugs into the United States. It's because it's a border place, border city. They'll traffic in that way. People like El Chapo were made famous, obviously, due to that. So would you say that there is sort of they already have a strong enough border already?
There is a need for it, but they'll always find a way around it. It might curtail the traffic a bit, though, so you can never hope to completely keep the US drugs free. Probably because you'll have plenty of people who are already in the US making, manufacturing drugs.
You see, that's the thing, that they'll already have organisations or bodies already within the United States itself facilitating it, so But would you say that's the primary reason he's doing this, though? Why he's wanting the wall, or would you say immigration is the other?
Well, that's the thing, though. It's illegal immigration that he's trying to curtail, not immigration in total. There's nothing wrong with Mexicans going to the United States, just as there's nothing wrong with anybody coming here, as long as you're coming here to benefit the country. You know, if you're just coming here to sponge, live off benefits off the country, which many people do, you know, this is the thing, though. It's often that I found, and when I was in the US, and this wasn't that long ago, I was in the US earlier this year in June, and quite a lot of people I'd spoken to, they agreed with the immigration measures because they themselves were immigrants. They came there legitimately with a desire to work, to become American, to integrate. And their concern is that, well, I went through all of this trouble, I went through all of the hoops, you know, I jumped through all of these hoops to get into the US, legitimately, legally, and with a good purpose and, you know, an actual excuse to be there. What use is that when, you know, guy I knew back home, this lowlife, is deciding to come over the border, no paperwork, no nothing. He's just snuck in, and now he's leeching off the country that I'm trying to do well in, and he's making me look bad. He's making my country look bad. He's making me look bad. You know. So the idea is that, yeah, we could curtail the amount of people who are coming in illegally, and really sort of emphasize the fact that if you're coming to America, you got to be American. You got to really make America great again, to use his phrase.
It's a case of assimilation, then, isn't it? It's a case of like
assimilate into the population.
It's a case of.
I mean, that's not to say that you can't bring parts of your own culture with you. You know, I've always argued that it's better to keep that part of yourself, but you don't have to expect the country that you're going to accept that. You've got to kind of take that on board when you move.
The first episode of Big Benjamin's Fight for Freedom I had was basically saying, look, I have no problem with other cultures here, but you can also enjoy the culture that's already here. You know, don't replace the existing culture without, you know, because I don't, like we said during the break, we don't mind what, you know, any other culture. It's just the fact that when it takes over and then...
Britain is a great example of a country that has worked well with immigration when we've done it right. We've had plenty of people who came over after the war, sort of after the Empire, when the Empire started falling apart. We had people coming in from the Caribbean, and we've had people coming from South Asia. People who have been here for a very long time now, you know, 60, 70 years, sort of around that period. People who've lived here that long and came here with a desire to be British, with a desire to, you know, but they brought really positive parts of their culture with them, and especially their cuisine. Their cuisine has really impacted on the British palate, which
that's
is
it. I mean,
a wonderful thing.
Well, you'll have seen the meme, won't you? It's like it says something like, being English these days is driving German cars and, you know, eating Italian food.
Well, maybe not for much longer with the German cars.
Well, maybe, but people kind of use it as sort of, well, no, look, we've got no idea of our own. I think that is the very idea of what we are. That is. I like the fact that we eat curry and we.
I think we've taken on good ideas. This is what they call. This is a. What do they call it? Cultural appropriation, isn't it? Cultural appropriation, this is positive. Cultural appropriation, I don't think there's a problem with appropriating something from other cultures if it's a benefit to yours.
You see, the problem I've got is like people hearing us saying this will think, well, they've got a certain, you know, that we may have a bias. And it's not a bias, I'm just saying, look, I love Diwali, I love the West Indian festivals. I want to share my culture with those people. If they're sharing theirs with mine, I like the sharing thing. It's not a case of like...
Sharing is caring.
Well, that's it. But it's a case of like, look, we're not against any other culture, because I'm not. We just want to share ours. And you get the fact that... we were talking about the media before the break. I get the feeling that our media is kind of against us a way. You know, the way that they demonise that flag.
Like native culture.
We're kind of like really self-loathing. And we've got a very, very productive progressive country, really.
Yeah, at least half of the population is. But, don't count us all out yet, because there are a lot of people who do care about this country. It just happens to be a certain media spin on it.
You know what I mean? Like, you get something like St. George's Day and it's demonised, and it's like, well...
there is no reason for that. That's unfair.
But that's what I'm saying, that's why we're self-loathing.
For example, take me, I'm not a Christian, I'm pagan, right? But I don't have anything against people wanting to celebrate St. George's Day. I know it's a part of this country's culture. I know it's been a long-standing thing, Christianity, even though it replaced, the gods that I believe in. It's...
Well, listen,
we live here harmoniously. You're a Christian man and I'm a pagan man, and yet we're having a very friendly discussion.
You see, because I accept that Christianity, along with Judaism and Islam, are not indigenous religions.
No, certainly not. Neither were mine, to be honest.
The people here had a religion before that. I still have no... the historians don't know what Stonehenge is, really.
No,
they reckon it's a religious monument of some kind.
I'm a Germanic pagan, so they aren't even indigenous to this island. This came in with the Angles. Look at my ancestry. I've got Dutch, I've got German, I've got Danish.
Yeah.
Most people in this country, to be fair, have that.
I think a lot of I think the majority of the white people here are sort of northern Western European origin.
Yes, of course.
Of course, we've got a lot of people from the east now. If you're talking about white people, of course, we've got everybody here, which is great. I made a point in the last show that, if you go to a city centre, you will see everybody. The United Kingdom, I'd still say, is about 90% white, but that doesn't mean that we're all...
87%. I think that was the last time
the
census...
But you see what I'm saying? They
it's
try
not
to...
a huge impact, really,
but
is it? You notice more when you're in a city like Leeds or in Manchester, where a lot of people have settled and have integrated.
But the point I'm making is that even though we're 87% white, and we're sort of demonised as being these sort of I suppose it comes from empire. We have a bit of that guilt left over, which goes into the self-loathing thing.
Unfortunately, that's none of our fault, though. Our generation
and the generation now is more progressive.
Have no part to play in what the empire did, whether you agree with it or not.
That was my argument in the first episode. I'm saying, look at what England is now, which is a progressive, smart, sensible country.
We can celebrate our history. We should celebrate the good parts of our history. We should certainly learn from the parts of our history that perhaps were not entirely glorious.
And yes, because every country makes mistakes. I don't villainise all German people now because of what they did a few generations ago.
Of course not.
Of course, you've got to demonise people with those sort of mindsets because...
And demonise the ideology where it's bad. Don't demonise the people.
I
as individuals.
I think as well you've got the media will firstly demonise the right wing, which it should. The far right do need demonising.
If we're talking about the fringes, yes.
I think they're a lot...
Not everybody.
They're not as harsh on the far left.
No, I think they should go after all of the dangerous ideologies and not just focus on one.
And that's the thing I'd agree with. But what I'm trying to say is with England is the self-loathing. It has a bit of guilt and empire, and it's
I feel we're getting a little off topic.
We've
got to go back to...
we've got to go back to Trump.
Mr. Trump.
And we started talking about his wall. This is how we get...
Where's he... What else has he done in the past year? Now, I've been looking at what he's doing recently, and I actually have a fairly positive opinion of what he's doing on an international scale. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with me there because they'll be thinking, he's warmongering with North Korea. But I think it's quite good that you finally got somebody who's willing to make a stand against a state that you've left alone for so long and has now actually caused so much suffering to people who live there. There are people who are they're subsisting off dirt. Or less.
It's like I said to you, it's
the start.
It shows you how bad an isolation this state can get. If you really have no contact with the outside world, and that's what we need to be avoiding at all costs with our own countries. The United States wants to be as far away from North Korea as possible, as far as socially, you know, they want to keep the idea of it. You see, the American dream was one
I
up.
don't think it was too bad of an idea, like leaving them alone until they, you know, got really seriously totalitarian. I mean, they've always been that way. It's now when they're developing nuclear weapons and actually being quite a serious threat to their neighbours, it's maybe the time to be concerned. I mean, I know China, who've been fairly supportive of North Korea, even they're getting fed up of what they're doing now. South Korea.
Do you reckon though that is the reason why he's been allowed to sort of go on for this?
Perhaps,
maybe
perhaps
the Chinese not support but sympathising maybe.
As it happens, I think so. And in a funny way, it shows in his most recent visit, because he's been out in the Far East as he's still out there at the moment. I think he's in the Philippines as of the making of this video. He's making a big splash in the East. He's quite popular in Japan. He's been seen with Abe. Now, you saw the doctored CNN report with the coy Trump just dumping it all in. That's what they do. But in China...
Can I ask one final question before the break, actually?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I would like to ask, because you mentioned CNN there. Now, this is slightly going a little bit to before topic.
Okay.
But... another thing with the media, that obviously they're all against Trump, but I think, is there a case for Hillary buying some of the media?
Yes, certainly.
Buying some of the media to be favourable towards her campaign?
That's American politics for you in general, to be honest.
That's a foreign concept to people in Britain. Our politicians can't buy the media. I suppose the media, in a way...
I don't know about that.
Well, I suppose maybe newspapers, but when you're talking about television, the television companies have to seem impartial. I mean, if they have a director and he will have his own political mind, and maybe that will filter down slightly. But do you think there was I know this is a slightly different question to the wall and his foreign relations, but do you think in the build-up to his presidency, that even now the media, that Hillary had sort of tried to tap the media against Trump
of course. I mean, this whole Russia, crap. That's the biggest rubbish I've ever heard. I mean, you got to remember, this is somebody who's she was trying to sell them. Was it uranium? And she's trying to sell to Russia when she was. What do they call a foreign secretary in America? You know what I mean.
I know, you like that, yeah.
Yeah, so it seems a little...
yeah, a little...
in her favour, perhaps? Yes, of course.
And then Trump, of course, he's obviously said, well, it's fake news then, hasn't he? That's his comeback to all this. It's like, fake news.
That's the thing, though, it's all fake news. It's all... As I've said in the previous part, find me someone who isn't unbiased.
And we're going to leave it there, because and we'll be back for part 3. Hello and welcome back to part 3 of Ian Benjamin's Fight for Freedom even. And we've got J.S. Cooper with me, and we've been, I was trying to talk about Trump, but we've got off topic on so many things.
So many things.
And there's
as you like to do when we talk about Trump, we seem to always deflect onto another subject.
I think because we've just so much to say, and I think it's when you've got all these things on your mind, and you're like a tanker raging forward. You've got so much to to go through.
And speaking of tanks raging forward, back to China.
Back to China. Now, before the break, I think I cut you off there, so let's...
So I was going to say how the thing with Trump that he's doing quite well at the moment, I think, is foreign relations. I could argue that because if you look at it, he's sort of had his Nixon in China moment already. He's gone over and they're calling him, the Chinese public are loving him at the moment, which is something I'd never expect. They're calling him stuff like Grand Commander and Uncle Trump, which is my favourite. They're calling him Uncle Trump, and he's talking to Xi Jinping. It's good because you would never have gotten that with the Obama administration. You don't have the same sort of... He seems a lot more personable with them, and it's not just politics. He has a way, and I think that's because of his background in business. It's his business to be good, public relations with other people in power. That's how you make alliances.
You see, the thing with China, though, they do have some issues with human rights.
Of course.
Now, my mindset at the moment is that it's probably good to keep China on side, especially with North Korea, sort of their attitudes at the moment, the sort of saber rattling that's going on. But there will have to be a day, I think, we have to sort of say to China, look, Tiananmen Square and all these things, you have to look at, is that system a good system? The one-child policy, I suppose that...
Well, they've gone away with the one-child policy now. So they're already making some lengths to improving. Every country in the world is always on a constant move one way or the other.
I suppose my next question then is, if they're beginning to call him Uncle Trump, do you think that China should take a more westerly direction now? Do you think that maybe with the friendship of America they could do that?
You never know. This could be the start of they're only communist in name in a lot of ways now anyway. They're moving more and more and more towards a free market, which is great. They'll find that once you've got a free market, you almost have to develop a sort of Western-style democracy. The two things do tend to go hand in hand. In regards to Trump and his foreign relations, and this is what I'm saying, like how he's met his Nixon in China moment, the fact that he's actually reaching out to them, despite everything he said in his election pledges, stuff like, every time that he mentioned China, it became a bit of a meme, didn't it? But he's now actually being a bit more pragmatic. He's going out there and he's talking to them. He's talking to President Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines today, and he's, Duterte's been quite anti-American until recently. He's just been kind of anti-everybody, really.
Do you think he can change minds? Do you think he can?
I think he can change minds, definitely. I mean, he's working with Putin in the sense that not in the.
We do have now to get to Russiagate, though.
Yes, no, I will come to that. The thing what I was going to say is that he's cooperating with Putin in a purely diplomatic way. It's none of this sort of Democrats telling you that he's pulling the strings with Russia and everything, or Russia's pulling his strings rather. It's on a sort of international scale. They've both made this pledge this week to fight ISIS on a not doing it independently, but together. They've finally reached a consensus that they should get rid of what remains of ISIS. And that's already a bit far gone because ISIS is on its way out anyway. From the way we see things, it's not what it was a year ago. It's not what it was a year and a half ago. We're now getting to the point where it's sort of wrapping up, and I guess that they're just going to work together on the cleanup of ISIS. And what happens next is, who knows? Who knows? Maybe Iraq will be the sphere of influence of America like it has been for the past decade or so, and Syria will end up being more of the sphere of influence of Russia, which they're already friendly, or Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin.
That's the thing, can America work with Assad? Because Obama personally has said that they wanted rid of him.
All I'd say in this instance, and maybe they've got a fresh opportunity now that the regime has changed, the president is a different person. I'd say just leave them be. If I was going to offer any sort of advice, I'd be just sort of like, it's better to have a benevolent dictator than a corrupt democracy, or to have a corrupt, well, I say corrupt democracy, a sort of, they have trouble with being able to hold these sort of things in that country because it's not in their culture to have them. They've never really had that before, and suddenly adopting Western policies out of the blue is what upsets the society. I think it would have been better to let them transition naturally. So with Iraq, for example, if they'd have just left Saddam alone or contained him, his own people would have grown tired of him eventually, and they would have.
You think there would have been an uprising?
I think there would have eventually been one, and there would have been eventual democratisation.
But would that have been a good uprising? Because we've seen, after the fall of Saddam, we saw a lot of Islamic extremist sort of factions go on the rise.
I mean, it's hyperbole, really, because we can't really,
Yeah,
it's a different timeline.
Yeah.
We don't know.
I mean, I do have to say, we're going on about Iraq and Syria. Will we let the Kurds down? Because my worry is that the Kurds are a repressed people in these areas. They've obviously got a very more democratic mindset. And I have a worry that the West has basically ignored them and will double cross them in their bid for independence. Now that is a fear to me.
For me, I have a very... I don't have a particularly strong opinion either way on the Kurds because it's a very messy situation. I can't really give my 2 cents towards it because I simply don't know enough to really give my own opinion. I wouldn't be impartial. That's the problem.
My feeling is I know I'm a bit pro Kurdistan, but I think that the thing with that is that they have fought ISIS. They have fought with us, and to me, they seem that they have a different mindset to the most of the countries around there. So they have a nation-state mentality. So they have a mentality of, we're the Kurdish people, we have the Kurdish language, we have a shared history. Sadly, a lot of that is of repression. They have a different mindset to, say, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which we cannot disguise what that is. That is the Islamic Republic, that is what it's for.
I guess.
It's not democracy, it's not like... It's not a nation-state mentality, it's the Islamic Republic before anything else.
All I would say is be careful who you get into bed with, because what happened in the 80s with the US and their involvement in Afghanistan, with them, supporting the Mujahideen against the Soviets in their invasion of... Rightly so, they should have, supported whoever against the fight against the Soviet Union invading their country. They wanted to keep it as a... independent nation state, but they funded people that they didn't really understand, and that came back to bite them. It really did. The Mujahideen then they took on Osama bin Laden, and Osama bin Laden used the military training that the Mujahideen had gotten to, start Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda then came back and bit the US on the arse, as it were. So you've got to be careful with who you get into bed with, especially in the Middle East. It's all very tricky
and tribal, isn't it?
The problem is that when the empire collapsed, when our empire collapsed, when France's empire collapsed, we didn't really do a great job on redrawing the borders of the countries that we were decolonising, and that left a lot of people on the wrong side of borders, or places that should have maybe had an ethnic state. Were a little hungry there, huh?
A little hungry, can you tell?
Were perhaps on the wrong side of the border when it was drawn, which is why you always let them get these sort of conflicts. Which is the thing with the Kurds, really. They never had their own nation state. They've never actually had their own nation state. They've never had Kurdistan. Kurdistan is just it's a goal for them. I won't say it's a pipe dream because it might very well be a reality. They're going to have a very difficult time if they do, because the Turks are not particularly keen, or at least Erdogan is not particularly keen, is he? I mean, the KPG, and they're labelled terrorists. They're not going to get an easy time from Iraq. I know that a lot of Iraqis want to keep Kurdistan as part of... They'll give them all the autonomy that they need, I guess, but they probably won't want to let them go.
But has it worked for Kurdistan in Iraq? Because they have the people. I know we will go to Trump eventually, But they do seem to have just suffered, really. Saddam Hussein had absolutely no fondness for them at all, let's put it that way. Does it work well for the Kurdish people within the Iraqi system?
Difficult to say. If I knew more about it, I honestly would need to do more research, and I think it's something that we should all do, to be honest.
Well, I think moving on from that then, the other major Trump issue was the trans ban. Now
trans in the military.
The trans in the military. Now, my attitude to this was, firstly, I did not agree with the way that he introduced it. So he introduced this on Twitter. It wasn't very
presidential, as you say.
My second thing is, overall, I disagree with it. And then the second thing is, I don't disagree to why he came up with this. Now, at the time it was like, oh, he's this big transphobic, crazy man. I didn't buy that. I think that if you're going to transition, you do have a lot of mental issues anyway. You've got to think for going through the process of changing your body, the process of
it's a very, that's a war in itself.
And I think that's a war in itself.
A sort of internal war.
And my ultimate feeling is, do you want people that have got mental problems carrying military hardware? Now that is a sensible thing to ask.
When you say that, you mean sort of the emotional,
Yeah, the emotional stresses of going through it all, and then you're on the front line having to face...
Will they be able to do their duty whilst they're transitioning? That is a fair point.
Now the point I have is it punishes the people who are very sound of mind in their body and sound with the transitions that they've made and are in the army. So that's why I disagreed with it overall, but I don't think he was the complete devil for coming up with
No,
it.
I think a lot of it was to do with people trying to join the military to use it as a way to fund their transition. And they're not doing it.
So you
right
felt that they were going to abuse the system to a degree?
Yes, that's the argument that a lot of people have presented, that a lot of people who did go into the military were... Well, I say a lot. This is really a very small number. The amount of people who are trans in the US military wasn't very high at all. But the fear was that there were people going in purely because they could get it done for free on the military. And I can understand kind of where he's coming from. That if they're just going to use it to abuse the system, then yeah. But I don't agree with it just on just wholesale getting rid of any trans soldiers. As long as they can fight, as long as they can do their duty for their country, it shouldn't really matter what gender they are or what sexuality they are. As long as they do their duty.
I think we're in complete agreement there.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for watching Big Benjamin's Fight for Freedom. We will be back soon, hopefully. Again, check us on the YouTube, Facebook, all the internet things. And I'm going to have a very big meal now. I want to thank J.S. Cooper for joining me.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Hope to have